The bane of every marker artist's existence. Yep, it's markers bleeding through to the other side of your beautiful sketchbook page. I don't know about you, but the one thing that has always bothered me about alcohol markers is how incredibly destructive they are to my pages and my perfectionist soul. Am I being a tiny bit dramatic? No. The backs of some of these pages are downright terrifying. And sure, I could maybe draw or paint over them, but it kind of ruins the fun of sitting down to a fresh page and letting the imagination go a little crazy. Well, now that's one less thing that I and you need to worry about. Ohuhu have just released their bleed-proof double-sided marker pads, and I'm here to show you everything that it is capable of, pros and cons, and just my general views. I'll be showing you a few test stages, as well as completing a full-page illustration. So let's get into it. For the sake of initial first impressions, let's have a little look at some details comparing the Ohuhu sketchbook that you see me usually using and the new bleed-proof sketchbook. The spiral-bound pad comes in the same 10 by 7.6 inches size that I normally use, which personally I really love. I like a sketchbook that allows me some space to draw full-bodied figures with details, but not so big that I feel completely overwhelmed by the page. The glue-bound pad is larger at 9 by 12 inches, so the option is there for people who prefer the larger space. There's also 60 sheets of paper in each, but with double-sided paper, that doubles to 120 pages that can be used. The paper weight is slightly lighter at 150 GSM compared to 200 GSM, and you might think that detrimental to the performance of the paper. Thinner paper equals easier to bleed through, right? Well, we'll get to that in the testing section. Also, can we please talk about the front cover? Having a plain white cover is such a huge improvement because now we can actually customize it with, well, whatever we want. I still haven't decided whether to do a drawing on it or decorate it with stickers, but I love that I have the option to make it pretty. Oh, and another welcome change is that this paper is FSC certified, which guarantees that the paper is made of responsibly sourced wood fiber. So a win for us and a win for the environment. Okay, so before diving straight into an illustration, I couldn't wait to see what this paper could handle. I'm impatient and I needed to know that this paper was going to live up to this pretty big claim. First test. A simple layer of a few different colors. Gotta start small. I instinctively went to search for my plastic sheet that Ohuhu provides with all of their sketchbooks. Obviously these new pads don't come with that, so I'll admit that I was a little nervous. First test complete and a success. I decided to try the other side of the paper on the same area because this paper is also double-sided and I wanted to really make sure that the paper hasn't been compromised in any way from the front. The paper on the back of the page feels exactly the same as the front, so I'm happy to see and feel the consistency, and I definitely feel confident that the paper is designed to withstand this amount of ink. Time to push it a little harder. I love to use gradients a lot in my work, which require more layers and obviously more ink. This is my favorite color gradient, which I'll be using for the illustration, and I'm not being conservative with the amount of ink I use to blend. If the paper can handle this, then I'm fairly confident it can handle anything I throw at it. And the result? Wow. Still showing absolutely no bleed through. But not just that, the paper hasn't warped in any way, which is incredible considering how saturated it is at this point. My final and ultimate test with alcohol markers. Can it withstand multiple layers of black ink? This is going to be the worst thing I'll have to put this paper through. Layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. You get the idea. Do you think it survived? You'll have to find out later on in the video because dramatic reveals are fun. I really wanted to get a good feel for this paper, so I decided to try and fill an entire page with an assortment of colors with different saturations and values. Instead of going for separate images on the same page, I wanted to make it look cohesive, like a comic book. I figured that it would be really nice to draw my OC Eve and her lovebird, who recently was named Coda, so thank you to Ellie for the very cool suggestion. I've recently started planning my spreads on my iPad first, because I feel like it really takes an incredible amount of stress away from the planning process. I'm usually a bit scared to start drawing directly on a page because it can be hard to visualize a composition and harder still to get it onto paper correctly. Since doing things this way, I feel like it really allows me to explore my ideas and get more creative, resulting in a much more harmonious looking page. I realized I could do this as a thumbnail on paper, but digital is so much faster and allows for multiple changes. I definitely recommend it into your workflow if you have access to digital equipment. I was very interested to see how the sketching process with my colored pencils would turn out. The surface feels very smooth compared to the regular Ohuhu paper, which already has a smooth cardstock feel. You can definitely feel a more satin-like finish, and I was worried that a hard lead pencil would struggle. Thankfully, that wasn't an issue at all, and I was able to complete my double sketch easily. Oh, and erasing pencil marks don't result in any smudging or staining of color, which is a huge plus for me too. There is something very, very important to note and consider. It's absolutely critical to make sure you're working from swatched colors, otherwise you might be in for a few surprises. Regardless of what paper you're using, you should always swatch your colors, but in this case, it'll definitely save you from a moment of panic. I noticed that lighter pastel colors, especially those that I used for Eve's skin, will initially lay down very desaturated and almost grey-like. Colors will always look different wet versus dry on any paper, but the composition of this paper clearly takes this to a new level. However, do not panic. You'll see as time goes on during this video that the colors change as they dry and look exactly as how they do in my swatch cards. Speaking of which, the drying time is something to take note of too. The ink takes longer to dry, and this slower drying characteristic is due to the composition of the paper, allowing it to be both bleed-proof and double-sided. If you're using water-based ink, which I also tested, this could lead to accidental smudging if you're not too careful, as this ink takes longer to absorb. However, alcohol markers absorb quicker, and I didn't notice any instance where I would be able to smear the ink. For me, I generally work quite fast, but for someone who works slowly, this would actually work in your favor. While I was blending the gradient in Eve's hair, I realized that the colors blended together much easier since they were still wet. This could potentially save you from using more ink than usual, which is an added plus for anyone who likes to layer and blend a lot into their illustrations. From a technical standpoint, I'm still able to use my markers with the same ease in this sketchbook. As I already mentioned, blending is so much easier now due to the longer drying time, but I also found that layering colors also seems to have a smoother result. Streakiness or color patches in markers can often be due to the coloring technique, but I found that I didn't have to work as hard to create a smooth finish. Before, when I might have needed 2 to 3 or more layers of ink to create an even color, I only needed 1 to 2 layers here. It's always more evident in the very dark colors, and you can see when I was working on Eve's trousers that I didn't require excessive layering. I still don't have a backstory for Eve yet. I've just been enjoying drawing her with absolutely no purpose other than for my own enjoyment. Although the addition of Coda is starting to shape her world a little bit. I'm honestly so proud of how this page turned out. I feel like it has a lot more personality compared to my usual sketch spreads, and I'd love to implement a more comic style feel in the future to my work. It's nice to have the element of interest that ties all of the images together, right? I hope you enjoy the rest of this process, and stick around for the bleed-proof reveals at the end. Alright, we're all done, so let's check the other side of this page and ta-da! Not a trace of ink to be seen. But I know the burning question you have right now. What about that insane black ink test? Well, I don't think it gets any better than this. What do you think? Thank you to Ohuhu for sending me out these sketchbooks to test, and also for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in purchasing one of these sketchbooks, they're available now on the Ohuhu website, as well as Ohuhu Amazon shops. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.